Alright, so welcome back, and we're starting on the second series of this tutorial. The first series is where we model this character, and now in the second series we're gonna learn how to UV map this guy and then how we can texture him in Photoshop so we can get a nice game character asset that we can put in Unity later on. Now, first things first, I want to show you a few things. If you go to display, heads up display, and we look at poly count. Now you see over here, just move it just a bit. If I were to select some of the models, it tells me how many vertices, how many edges, faces, triangles, etc. All this information that this model has. Now it's best if you just select all of your model over here. Now you can see for my faces, currently I have about 2048 faces. That's good enough for a game model. Typically you want to have something below 5000 faces for like a character model. We can still adjust some of these things a bit more. For example, over here in the eye, if I just isolate it, I actually don't need some of these faces back here, and I can actually delete some of them, which I think I'll just do it right now. Alright, so that's going to reduce our poly count, so we'll just do it for this guy as well. So we're gonna delete away these faces over here. Right, and it's gonna reduce our polygon count quite a bit, so it's now about below 2000, so still quite good. So that's one thing for me to show. Let me just save this for a while, and let's go to a new scene where I want to show you the basics of UV mapping. So let me create a cube over here. Right, so I have a cube over here, press F to frame it, scale it up a bit. Alright, so a cube is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. Alright, now depending on your model, it would be made up of different number of faces. Now the idea is that we want to flatten out these faces in a 2D space so that we can bring that into Photoshop, and you can start to paint it, put textures on it. Alright, now to view this model in a so-called 2D space, what we do is we go to Window, General Editor, and sorry, not General Editor, we go to Window and UV Editor straight away. And as you can see over here, these faces, these 6 faces, is represented in this way. So if I were to bring this into Photoshop, I can start to paint this exactly how I want it to be. And after that, for example, if I put a logo over here, let's see, as I put a logo over here, and it will appear right over here on a 3D model. Alright, so the idea is that this 2D layout will be wrapped around this 3D model to create the texture, if that makes sense to you. However, of course, a cube is a extremely simple object. Now if you start to take things like a sphere, for example, right, as you can see, the sphere now has all of these funny triangles and stuff going on. And if I were to introduce a few other things over here, a cylinder, as you can see, the faces up top here is separated and the faces over here is separated. Alright, so what happens is that the edge around here, this is what we start to call a seam. Alright, like the seam on your shirt. Alright, so this is the area where the two borderlines meet, and probably because of the shape of the size or the model itself, they cannot be stitched together into this space, therefore they have to be separated. So you have the top face over here, and then the rest of the cylinder over here. Now there's actually another seam which is right over here. Right, so this and this edge, they're the same edge. It's just that we cannot wrap it around into this space, so therefore we have it on this side and this side, and it wraps around this 3D model over here. So I hope that makes sense for you to have a basic understanding of how a UV actually works out. Now let's go back to the model that we have. So this is the model that we have over here, and again the idea is to have a 2D version of this guy, for example for the head, for the body and for the legs, so that we can start to paint this character in Photoshop. So if I go to window and UV editor again and perhaps select the head, as you can see it can look quite funny, quite messy. All the faces are all over the place. Alright, so let's start with one thing at a time. Let's just work on the head first. So I'm just gonna hide unselected objects. Now I'm gonna go to my hypershade over here. So this button over here brings you to your hypershade, and in the hypershade you can see a few things over here. Okay, I probably can get rid of this thing over here. I'll just have these three things to work with. So firstly, this is your materials tab. Alright, so it tells you what are the materials that you have at your disposal, and if you want to create new materials, you can go up over here and there's quite a number of materials that you can use. Alright, so I'm not gonna complicate you and confuse you because there's quite a number of things over here and we haven't even touched shaders yet. So let's just keep it very simple. Let's just create a Lambert. Alright, so I have this Lambert over here. I'll call this Lambert over here on the right side UV placeholder. Okay, now I'm gonna click on the color on the right side here. You see there's a checkered box over here. I'm gonna click on that and I'm gonna ask for file. Alright, so after that it's gonna ask me, alright, which file you want to select. Now I'm gonna go to my alien file here. Under images I have a UV deck over here. Alright, this would help me to see the stretching of my texture a bit better. So I click on open, right, and I can select my head model, right click, assign material to selection. Now make sure you press 6 on your keyboard for you to view shaded mode with texture. If you just press 5, you just see the shaded mode. So you need to press 6 so that you can see it with the texture. As you can see over here, some of these numbers and words, they are not really properly displayed. Some are bigger, some are stretched out, some are super duper small over here. So we need to keep it consistent and we need to try to keep it as even as you can throughout the whole model. So that's the idea of UV mapping, so that once we bring it to Photoshop, whatever texture that we apply on it, it won't look stretched out and look very funny looking. So for example, if you have a mole over here, if you want your character to have a mole over here and you just draw it quite small on Photoshop, and because you didn't do the UVs properly and you bring it inside Maya, the mole might become super big over here and consume almost half of the face and it would look very ugly. So that's not nice. So what we want to do is keep the UVs spaced out as evenly as we can. Alright, so that's the idea. Now traditionally, and when I say traditionally, it's about only 4 or 5 years ago, we don't have tools like, if you look over here under UV, which is under your modeling or polygon tab, depending on which version you use, we do not have things like unfold or cut UV edges. Alright, these things don't exist at that time. You have to actually put in a plugin and you need to actually use those plugins to help you create your UVs much faster. And it used to be UVs can take you days to finish. Alright, that's because we used to use the traditional tools like cylindrical mapping, planar mapping, so on and so forth to create our UVs. So let me just show you an example. If I were to select these faces over here, let's say I just want to UV map these 4 faces over here, what I can do is I can go to UV and I can go to planar and go to the option box and perhaps say that, alright, Maya, please UV map this area from the z-axis, which is the front, alright, from the z-axis, alright, and tell me what you can create from there. So I'll click on apply. Then as you can see that I get a very neat looking UV map right over here. Because these four faces is relatively straight, we won't have a lot of issues with it. Alright, now if I go back to my window UV editor over here, I can start to see that four faces I have, which is right over here. Alright, so it is represented this way in the UV map. Alright, these guys are still like this, the rest of them are still hidden somewhere inside here, but at least this four has been mapped properly. Alright, so that's just a simple demonstration. Now another thing is that if let's say you were to select these faces at the side over here as well, and you tell Maya that, okay Maya, do the same thing, please go and map it from the z-axis, and then you click on project. Now from over here it kind of looks okay, still consistent with this one, but once you start to rotate and you start to see over here, these areas start to stretch out. So that is not a correct way to do it either. Alright, so traditionally we have to use a variety of either cylindrical, planar or spherical mapping tools for us to kind of map all of these areas, and once they are mapped and sorted out over here, we actually have to go and stitch them up. So for example, we have this edge, these two edges over here, which is here and here. We have to use things like the move and cut to snap them up. Alright, so for example over here, there's a few tools over here. You can separate the UV, you can sew the UV. So for example over here I can sew the selected edges, and they actually become one edge or one whole shape again. Alright, so as you can see over here, it becomes kind of one shape again, although it's a bit on the wrong side. I should have flipped the UVs just now. Right, so again, that's just giving you a basic understanding of how the whole UV process works. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is I'm going to show you how we can actually do things a bit faster by using our unfold and our cut UV edges, so that it will kind of relieve you of some of the pain of having to go through the traditional part of UV mapping. Perhaps we'll do that for some of these areas which are much more easier, like this part of the hand and maybe some parts of the legs. We'll see how, but for the most part we're gonna use the new tools and we're gonna start from there.